This video is the third part of a four-part video series on designing and delivering asynchronous online instruction. If you haven't viewed the first two videos, please go back and do that now and then return to this video in which we examine ways to design and produce the online learning activities. In a face-to-face environment, you're accustomed to working from a lesson plan, a document that guides how you will lead your students through instruction, even though they never see that document. In an asynchronous lesson, though, you can't always give instructions vocally in real time. Students don't always have you immediately available to show them the way. For that reason, much of the online lesson should be written. While there are many ways to design online activities in asynchronous lessons, how you communicate those activities will make a difference in whether your students meet performance outcomes. Your students will have a better chance of success if you design lessons so that they are logically ordered, clearly written, and easy to navigate. That means that online lessons need very clear step-by-step instructions. For face-to-face environments, your lesson plans often include general information of the questions you will ask and the ways you expect your students to respond. But on a lesson plan, you don't write a script of the lesson because the real-time instruction brings unexpected comments and questions and behaviors from the students. You can't always anticipate what will happen. But when students are participating in an asynchronous lesson, they will depend heavily on your chronological instructions. So the lesson should say, first do this, then do that, next do this other thing. A written lesson should use numbers or letters to indicate the order of procedures, and you might also use bold type or colored lettering to guide the eye easily from one step to the next. Typographical elements such as horizontal lines can divide activities into manageable chunks so that if students need to leave a lesson at some point and return to it later, they can see logical places where that would be possible. Take a look at this image from an online module from Practicum 1, SCED 3721. Notice that the instructions in this module are ordered as steps, labeled as Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. Each part is not only numbered, but it's also written in bold type. And then within each part, specific steps are indicated with bullets. These indicators communicate a logic to the lesson's procedures, and they serve as helpful indicators if students ever have to leave the module and return later. Notice also that this lesson uses horizontal lines to divide up the module into manageable chunks. A written asynchronous lesson also includes details reflecting time involvement of activities. In asynchronous environments, lesson details can help students plan their work if they know approximate time limits for different steps of the lesson. Remember, in our previous video, we discussed how online students must manage other distractions in their households. For instance, it wouldn't make sense for Jessica to start a 30-minute video if in 15 minutes her little brother has to use that same computer to log into a Zoom lesson. Neither would it make sense for Jessica to begin an hour-long activity if in 20 minutes her mother has to take her to a doctor's appointment. For these reasons, it makes sense to communicate to students how long it will take for them to complete certain activities. And of course, different students complete different activities in different paces, so we need to approximate when necessary, but still we can offer that information. Here are some examples of how to help students gauge their learning time requirements. When instructing students to watch a video, you can explain to them how long it is, such as, please watch this 5-minute video on the skeletal system. When we instruct students to read a text, we can explain to them how long it is and help them to see how long it should take them to complete it. For instance, we could say, next, read this editorial piece by Brent Staples. Many students can complete this reading assignment in about 30 minutes. If students need to take a quiz, if the students need to take a quiz, we should tell them if there's a time limit. Often quizzes are timed in online classes. But if there is no time limit, we should explain in the instructions how many questions are on the quiz and estimate how much time it should take students to complete it. For instance, we could say, this quiz has 25 questions and you have 40 minutes to complete it. That would be if the quiz is timed. But if the quiz is not timed, we could say something like, this quiz has 25 questions and you should be able to complete it within an hour. If a lesson includes the use of a discussion board, we can explain when different stages of that discussion should take place. For instance, we could say, you should post your original thoughts by Tuesday at 2 p.m. Between Tuesday and Friday, read your classmates' posts and respond to them. You should have posted 2 responses by Friday at 2 p.m. Such a statement explains to students not only when they should have accomplished different stages of the discussion, but it also gives them an overall view of how long the entire discussion will take place. If a learning activity is portable, you might mention that and suggest that students take the activity with them. For instance, we could say something like, this 30-minute lecture is available in audio format through our Anchor podcast. If you would like to listen to it on the go, you can connect to it there. In addition to chronological steps and time involvement details, we need to provide clear, specific expectations of what students are supposed to do. For lesson procedures, assignment guidelines, and assessments, we need to write very precise instructions of what we expect of our students. Remember that in asynchronous environments, students can't simply raise their hands and ask quick clarifying questions, so it's up to us to be very specific and thorough up front. For instance, if you need students to access a website and read specific information on that website, it's not enough to simply give them the URL. We need to give them instructions on where they would find specific information. In this slide, I'm showing you a zoomed in shot of the lesson that we examined previously. Notice how in part 1, the lesson explains how to scroll down a web page and look for specific discussion questions. If you can provide screenshots of portions of web pages, those help to illustrate what you need students to do. Instructions on assessments should be just as specific. For instance, when students take a quiz, it's not enough just to tell them to take it. They need the following information. Is the quiz timed? If so, for how long? What will happen if they extend beyond that time limit? Will the quiz be graded automatically, or will you release the grades at a certain time? Is the quiz objective or subjective? How many points can they earn on that quiz, and how much does that grade factor into the course grade? And finally, when is the quiz due? Be very precise about that time. Avoid phrases such as at the end of the day, and instead use a precise time such as 11 o'clock p.m. January 31st. Embedded links and videos and images are also helpful in providing clear information. Those kinds of details also make the learning process simpler when it comes to navigating the asynchronous lesson. Because online learning requires navigating from one tool to the next, students can become confused if they have to link through multiple layers of information. Linking them directly to tools and resources can simplify the route, and that enables students to focus on learning rather than navigation. If students must access an external website for the lesson, certainly provide the link to that website. If students must view a YouTube video for the lesson, if possible, embed the video into the lesson so that students won't have to go to a different site to see it. If you can't embed the video, then provide the link to that video so that students can go directly to it. If students must participate in a discussion for the lesson, provide the link to that discussion topic. And the same applies to any Zoom discussions that you might have. Finally, for all instructional activities, students might have questions or need assistance. In your instructional procedures, provide information about how students can get the answers or the help that they need. The following passages serve as some examples. If you have any questions about this assignment, you may post them to our Muddiest Point discussion board. If you have any questions about this activity, please contact Dr. Jones at this email address. Or if you need assistance loading the video, please contact the help desk at this phone number. Remember from our previous video about instructional materials, variety always helps. This same concept applies to learning activities. The variety of activities helps students to stay engaged with the course, but that variety also enables them to use different levels of thinking. And of course, varied activities enable you to differentiate instruction to meet the needs of all learners. If your course consists of modules made up solely of reading materials and multiple choice questions, then students will find shortcuts to passing those assessments. They might also become disengaged in the learning process. However, if your course consists of learning activities that include, for instance, reading, viewing, discussing, analyzing, and objective assessment, then students can engage in different critical thinking skills in those different activities. Varying activities, though, doesn't mean that you have to throw logic to the wind. You can create logical patterns across lessons to help students navigate those lessons successfully. For instance, I recently taught a literature class that followed this pattern. Each lesson started with a reading assignment about a specific literary period. Then students completed a short self-assessment covering those concepts. Then they watched a brief video explaining the literary period further with examples from works of literature. Next, they had an assignment to read one or two works of literature from that period. A discussion via the discussion board enabled students to analyze those works of literature according to the characteristics of that period. And then my replies to the discussion clarified elements where students expressed confusion or asked questions. And then finally, a test about the literary period and the works of literature included objective questions and essay questions. In each module, activities followed the same order, so students knew what to expect. In each module, students had variety in their activities: reading, recalling, viewing, discussing, and analyzing. In each module, students had opportunities to engage with the subject matter with each other and with me. And in each module, students had one self-assessment and two teacher-evaluated assessments, the discussion and the test. Still, though, each module included enough variety of critical thinking and activities that they couldn't shortchange themselves in the learning process. This concludes part 3 of our 4-part video series. When you finish this video, please move forward to part 4.